Welcome back to the Jeremiah Bible study. We are in the second to last chapter in the book of Jeremiah. So please turn to Jeremiah chapter 51. This is going to kind of be a bit of a long lesson, so I'll get started promptly. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 1. Behold, I will raise up against Babylon, against those who dwell in Leb Kamai, a destroying wind. Leb Kamai, I don't actually know what it is. The commentators tell me it's like another saying for Babylon. And I will send winnowers to Babylon, who shall winnow her and empty her land. For in the day of doom they shall be against her all around. Against her let the archer bend his bow, and lift himself up against her in his armor. Do not spare her young men, utterly destroy all her army. Last week we were in the first chapter of the God's judgment upon Babylon. This is the second chapter in a row that Jeremiah devotes entirely to the destruction of Babylon. And last week we talked about, we asked a couple different questions. First was, is this, why is God judging the nation of Babylon when he essentially just was using it as his tool to judge other nations, particularly Judah? And we looked at some of the reasons for that. It was mainly because of their pride and perhaps because they overextended their mandate, and they took pleasure in what they were doing. Even though we did see Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of Babylon's army, he recognized, or he pointed out to Jeremiah, that all this happened because of the sin of Judah. And of course that was true, but one wonders exactly to what extent he actually believed it, or if he was just telling Jeremiah, this is what you were saying, and your prophecy came true. And then the other question was, does this is this fulfilled entirely in Jeremiah's time? That is, with the conquer of Babylon, or how Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians, or are we awaiting a greater fulfillment in the future? And we looked at Revelations chapters 17 and 18, or we didn't actually get into it, but we will today. The traditional view is that Revelation chapter 17 is religious Babylon, and Revelation chapter 18 is political and economic Babylon. And so we're looking in chapter 50 to see clues that maybe this wasn't entirely fulfilled. Maybe it will be fully fulfilled in Revelation. And we saw some things like this, like we saw the walls being cast down, not just that they decay over time, as we know from history, but that they'd be cast down, kind of like a Jericho type falling of walls. And this, the army, the fights, the battle of Babylon. We know that from the book of Daniel that Babylon, and from the writings of Herodotus, I might add, Babylon was taken without a fight. So the Medes and Persians conquered Babylon without having to have a big battle, without having a siege that lasted, without having to break down the walls, because they came in underneath the city walls. The guards on the walls weren't even paying attention because they felt so secure. The gates weren't even closed. That a tributary of the Euphrates flowed underneath, and they diverted that, and they were able to just come up right inside, to the point where Belshazzar and his people didn't even know it was taken right away, because it fell without a fight. So once again, this doesn't seem to line up with that, this verse that we just read. And so this utterly destroy all her army. I don't know what happened to the Babylonian army that had been inside. Maybe they executed everyone, but it doesn't seem to be this battle with arrows and such as this text is describing. Verse 4, Thus the slain shall fall in the land of the Chaldeans, and those thrust through inner streets. For Israel is not forsaken, nor Judah by his God, the Lord of hosts, though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. This is one of the key verses in this passage. This is we're going to see this comparison between Babylon and its God and Israel and its God. Yes, it's true that Israel, or specifically Judah, fell to the Babylonians. But that doesn't mean that the Babylonian God is more powerful than the God of Israel. In fact, the God of Israel is the one orchestrating those events for as a means of judging, of disciplining the nation of Judah. We're going to see that the real futility is the Babylonian God, that they have no spiritual core. And if you look today, there's no Babylonian Empire today. There's no city of Babylon. That recreation that Saddam Hussein built in the place where Babylon was, it's very tacky. The walls are nothing compared to what they were in the time of the actual Babylonians. So we're gonna see that here in these next few verses. Verse 6: Flee from the midst of Babylon, and everyone save his life. Do not be cut off from their iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He shall recompense her. And someone could say, well, this is talking about, the Jews going back to the land of Israel in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Although they weren't really fleeing specifically from Babylon, they were really departing peacefully from the Persian Empire, which had replaced Babylon. Were the Jews tipped off by Daniel, and did they leave the city before it was taken that particular day? We don't see any evidence of that. We do see this concept in the book of Revelation that God's people need to flee from there before it's destroyed. So once again, we're seeing hints that maybe this isn't just fulfilled in Jeremiah's lifetime, or this isn't just a near fulfillment in that the Babylonians are going to be taken by the Persians, but maybe more so that this has implications for the end times and for Revelation in chapters 17, and more specifically in chapter 18. Verse 7: Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunk. The nations drank her wine, therefore the nations are deranged. Remember this when we get to Revelation chapter 18 as well, because there's this idea of the nations becoming drunk. Verse 8: Babylon has suddenly fallen and been destroyed. Wail for her. Take balm for her pain. Perhaps she may be healed. Keep on getting these references to the balm in Gilead. So that's just interesting. You can go back to do a search for balm on the internet and look back at some of those chapters where we talked about this. Verse 9: We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her. Let us go, everyone, to his own country, for her judgments reach us to heaven and is lifted up to the skies. The Lord has revealed our righteousness. Come and let us declare in Zion the work of our God, the work of the Lord our God. Mentioning the Lord our righteousness. This is some of the prophecies that we saw in Jeremiah earlier regarding the new covenant. Also, there's definitely some feeling of the return to Israel during Ezra and Nehemiah's time. Verse 11: Make the arrows bright, gather the shields. The Lord has raised up the spirit of the king of the Medes, for his plan is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple. The king, the Persian king Cyrus, is half Median and half Persian, and it's a combination of the armies of Media and Persia that defeat the Babylonian Empire, as well as some of their allies. Verse 12: Set up the standard on the walls of Babylon, make the guard strong, set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes, for the Lord has both devised and done what he spoke against the inhabitants of Babylon. O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, your end has come, the measure of your covetousness. This the many waters here is referring to the Euphrates, the tributary of the Euphrates that flowed through the city. There's also a lake that they had filled up that was fed by the Euphrates, and there's the Tigris River that's pretty close to that. There might even be some allusions here to the Babylonian myth of Tiamat and the water creature there, and the fear of waters that permeated Babylonian society. Verse 14, the Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, surely I will fill you with men as with locusts, and they shall lift up a shout against you. He has made the earth by his power. He has established the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heaven by his understanding. When he utters his voice, there's a multitude of waters in the heavens. He caused the vapors to ascend from the end of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain. He brings the wind out of his treasuries. So you think King of Babylon, you think you're really the one who's got power of the waters? Well, it's really the Lord. He has the real power over waters. He has the real treasuries of water and wind and the storm. Verse 17, everyone is dull-hearted without knowledge. Every metalsmith is put to shame by the carved image, for his molded image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. Now we're getting to this concept of the God of the Babylonians. We had last chapter we started out with. Let me read that again. Last chapter 50, verse 1, started out with Babylon is taken, Bel is ashamed, Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are humiliated, her images are broken in pieces. So in that context, here we're talking about God's judgment upon Babylon, that he destroyed the gods. Apparently when Belshazzar, the king, was slain that very same night when the handwriting was on the wall, they also probably went into the temple and crushed the Babylonian god, turned that thing into powder. Really, it's God who has done this, who has shown that the God of Judah really is greater than the God of Babylon. And we're going to see this play out here a little bit more. In verse 18, they are futile, a work of errors. In the time of their punishment, they shall perish. The portion of Jacob is not like them. So this is comparing the Babylonians, who all human, the way of man would say they're the superior ones, or religious people would say, oh, obviously their God is more superior. Well, no, their God is going to crumble. The Jewish people are going to maintain to be a population long after the Babylonians. There's no Babylonians alive today. There's no Babylonian Empire. So this is that comparison. And this verse is a little bit difficult to understand. In my translation here, which is the New King James, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the maker of all things, and Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. This Israel doesn't actually even appear in the Hebrew in this particular spot, but I think that this is correct. That the idea here is the juxtapositioning of Jacob, the Jacobites. You know, that's what Israel is called when Israel is not being faithful to the covenant. They're the Jacobites, and being compared, their religious system is being compared to the Babylonian religious system and the Babylonian people. So if you read this literally in Hebrew, it's something more like, the portion of Jacob is not like them. He is the maker of all things, and the tribe or the staff of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Because this word, that's tribe, is the same Hebrew word for staff. So it's the translator kind of makes a decision as to which English word to use here. There's some ambiguity, but it's hard to tell here, even where what the antecedent is. He is the maker of all things. It almost would seem like the portion of almost seems like Jacob is the maker of all things when you look at the Hebrew, but the context would determine that this is actually talking about the Lord, because we're comparing Judah's God or Jacob's God to the Babylonian God, the actual maker of all things, the God who can't just be crushed by an opposing army. That's the problem when your God is made of stone. It can be captured, it can be destroyed, it can you can learn very quickly that it's not any kind of God at all when it's too late. And this idea of Israel being the tribe of his inheritance, this probably or the staff of his inheritance. In certain places in the Bible, God is looked at as the inheritance of Israel, but also Israel is the inheritance of God. So more specifically, like the tribe of Levi is said to have God as their inheritance. So there could be some allusion to that, some reference back to that. This word tribe, staff is the same word when Jacob was blessing his son Judah. So if we're thinking about the tribe of Judah that just got defeated by the Babylonians, and we're now connecting it back to Jacob, and that the portion of Jacob is not like them. Maybe Jeremiah, or God through Jeremiah, is trying to make people think of those verses back there in Genesis. The staff shall never depart from Judah, which is a messianic prophecy, could be kind of intended to be referenced in this particular spot. The Lord of hosts is his name. This is the name of the Lord that you get when it's in very much of a military context. Jehovah Tsabaoth, or Yahweh Tsabaoth, the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of armies. It does definitely make me think of Revelation, Christ's return. In his first visit, it was a visit of peace. It was a visit of self-sacrifice. And his second coming is going to be a coming where he is going to be the Messiah who makes war with the nations and is and defeats the nations. It's talked about as his clothing being red with blood. So could very well have an allusion to Christ here, and Christ being the Lord of hosts, the one who's going to fight for Babel or for Israel against spiritual Babylon, or conceptual Babylon in the book of Revelation, or who knows, maybe even Babylon will be rebuilt, although history thus far seems like that is not going to happen. Verse 20, you are my battle axe and weapon of war, for with you I will break the nation in pieces. With you I will destroy kingdoms. Now this verses 20 through 23 is talking about a battle axe, and the sound that's coming from this is very much like the sound of reaching back, swinging, and hitting. You've got this in you is in Hebrew bacha, and it's like bacha is like the echo of the hammer or the axe hitting and crushing, and so let me read this for you in Hebrew, because it's kind of like in The Music Man. You have that scene where they're on the train, and the song they're singing kind of sounds like a train slowly picking up speed, and then the train sound, and eventually the train kind of slowing down, and even the whistle of the train, all the train sounds are in the song. Well, here you have poetry that gives like the sound of the axe being swung, or the sound of the hammer crushing, and the bakah. So let me read this in Hebrew. Mapetz atali kali milchama va dipatzti bacha goyim, v'hishachti bacha milchamot, v'nipatzti bacha sus v'rochvo, v'nipatzti bacha rechav v'rochovo, v'nipatzti bacha ish v'isha, v'nipatzti bacha zaken v'na'ar, v'pitatzti bacha bachor u betula, v'nipatzti bacha roe v'edrov, v'nipatzti bacha ikar v'tzimdo, v'nipatzti bacha pachot u sagalim. So you hear that? The nipatzti bacha over and over and over again. And who is this battle axe, or who is this hammer, depending on your translation of the Bible that's being talked about here? It is in the masculine and singular. Most commentators think that this is talking about Babylon, and I tend to agree with them, because this is the chapter that's talking about God's judgment upon Babylon. In other words, God used Babylon to do all this crushing. Some people think that it refers to Cyrus, because now they're being crushed by someone who's doing that same kind of hammering like they had done. Either way, it's just very interesting, the Hebrew and the echoing of the sound. And this happens actually a lot in Hebrew. This is maybe the best example I've seen, though, that really knowing Hebrew and being able to hear it colors the perception of the passage. Well, let's read through that in English here. For with you are my battle axe and my weapons of war. For with you I will break the nations in pieces. With you I will destroy kingdoms. With you I will break in pieces the horse and its rider. With you I will break in pieces the chariot and its rider. With you also I will break in pieces men and women. With you I will break in pieces old and young. With you I will break in pieces the young man and the maiden. With you also I will break in pieces the shepherd and his flock. With you I will break in pieces the farmer and his yoke of oxen. And with you I will break in pieces governors and rulers. And I will repay Babylon and all the inhabitants of Chaldea for all the evil they have done in Zion in your sight, says the Lord. Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountain, who destroys all the earth, says the Lord. And I will stretch out my hand against you, roll you down from the rocks, and make you a burnt mountain. This is the nation of Babylon is like this giant, haughty mountain, and now it's being brought down low. Verse 26, they shall not take from you a stone for a corner, nor a stone for a foundation, but you shall be desolate forever, says the Lord. And certainly Babylon sat desolate for a very long time until Saddam Hussein went in there and built those tacky walls. And there are a lot of tourists who go there, mostly Iraqi tourists. It's still not considered safe for Westerners to go to Iraq and visit tourist sites. So lots of Iraqi visitors come. So I don't know, is it really desolate? I also looked at some of the history, because I was trying to look at and see if there was a later time period in which the walls were broken down. But it does seem to be that they just kind of crumbled slowly over time. After Alexander the Great came into the land, he viewed the beautiful Ishtar Gate. He may have the people who were translating the inscriptions on it. It seems like from history that they didn't even know how to read it. They were written in Akkadian, which is just kind of an interesting little note. But after the Greek period, all that area falls to the Romans. The Romans lose it slowly over time, and eventually the Roman Empire falls, and then various other groups come in there. There's various Muslim empires that rule over that time, and the walls just kind of crumble. And there's even a reference to people building in Baghdad that they would go to Babylon to get bricks. So it was like a a place where they would go. So it does seem strange that they would not take from you a stone for a corner nor a stone for a foundation, but you shall be desolate. This almost um, makes us think, well, again, with this thing about the walls falling down suddenly and all this battling that's talked about having happened when we know from history that the city seems to have been taken without a fight, that maybe this stuff hasn't been fulfilled yet and really is looking forward to a future fulfillment. And obviously the place that we'd be looking to would be Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Will Babylon be rebuilt? Like I said, doesn't seem to me that way, but perhaps this is talking about conceptual or Babylon or the world's system, which is being called a Babylon in the book of Revelation. We shall see through the course of time. Verse 27, set up a banner in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nation against her, call the kingdoms together against her. Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz appoint a general against her, cause the horses to come up like the bristling locusts. I think this mention of these places, Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz, these are all places that are way up north of Babylon, places that were brought into the Medo-Persian Empire, and probably they had armies that were stationed up there that they used to bring down as they were attacking the Babylonian Empire. And I'm sure that when they did finally take the city of Babylon, they were ready for a big fight. So they probably had some huge armies there, even though they ended up taking the city without a fight. Some people probably came from these areas. I think it's important for their narration because of this concept of attackers always come from the north. The people in Israel were always watching out for attackers from the north. People in Egypt were always watching out for attackers from the north. It could be why they brought in the Philistines, to be a buffer from groups in the north from attacking them. You can't attack from the west because the Mediterranean Sea is there. You can't attack from the east because the desert's there. So they always were watching out for attacks from the north. And now this attacker from the north, the Babylonians, is going to be attacked from the north. So it's kind of a punishment fits the crime idea here. Verse 28, prepare against her in nations with the kings of the Medes, its governor and all its rulers, all the land of his dominion. And the land will tremble and sorrow, for every purpose of the Lord shall be performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a desolation without inhabitant. The mighty men of Babylon have ceased fighting. They have remained in their strongholds. Their might has failed. They became like women. They have burned her dwelling places. The bars of her gates are broken. One runner will run to meet another, and one messenger to meet another, to show the king of Babylon that the city is taken on all sides. So the idea here is that Babylon's so big, such a huge city. It's like the size of Chicago, and it gets taken from all sides at the same time. So the idea here is that they have runners coming from different sides of the city, all reaching the center about the same time to say the city's been taken. People in the center didn't even know the city was taken right away. That's how quickly the city was taken on that fateful night after Belshazzar had seen the handwriting on the wall that we read about in the book of Daniel. Verse 32, the passages are blocked, the reeds they have burned with fire, and the men of war are terrified. So apparently after the Persians got inside the walls, then they shut the gates so that the Babylonian army couldn't escape. And they set the reeds around there's all this marshland around the city. They set those on fire to stop the Babylonian soldiers from escaping. What happened to them? I don't know. Maybe they were executed. Who knows? But they weren't able to escape. So, verse 33, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor. When it is time to thresh her yet a little while, and the time of harvest will come. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has devoured me. Here we have the city of Jerusalem personified and kind of saying what happened to her. And we're going to see this picked up when we get into the book of Lamentations. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has devoured me. He has crushed me. He has made me an empty vessel. He has swallowed me up like a monster. He has filled his stomach with my delicacies. He has spit me out. Let the violence done to me and my flesh be upon Babylon. The inhabitant of Zion will say, and my blood be upon the inhabitants of Chaldea, Jerusalem will say. Therefore, thus says the Lord who is avenging Jerusalem. Behold, I will plead your case and take vengeance for you. I will dry up her sea and make her springs dry. Babylon shall become a heap, a dwelling place for jackals, an astonishment and a hissing without inhabitant. And it certainly was for a very long time. The only difference is now those tacky walls that are up there. Verse 38. They shall roar together like lions. They shall growl like lions' whelps. In their excitement, I will prepare their feasts. I will make them drunk, that they may rejoice and sleep a perpetual sleep and not awake, says the Lord. I will bring them down like lambs to the slaughter, like rams with male goats. Oh, how Shishak is taken. Again, I don't know what Shishak is. The commentators say this is like another reference to Babylon. Oh, how the praise of the whole earth is seized. How Babylon has become desolate among the nations. The sea has come up over Babylon. She is covered with the multitudes of its waves. As perhaps, again, an allusion to Tiamat. Her cities are a desolation, a dry land, and a wilderness, a land where no one dwells, through which no son of man passes. I will punish Baal, B-E-L, in Babylon. This is the god of Babylon. This is the name that's essentially the Eastern Semitic version of Baal, or the which is the Canaanite god. It's a Semitic word that just means Lord, and will bring out of its mouth what he has swallowed, and the nations shall not stream to him any more. Yes, the wall of Babylon shall fall. My people, go out of the midst from her. Let everyone deliver himself from the fierce anger of the Lord, and lest your heart faint, and you will fear the rumor that will be heard in the land. A rumor will come 1 year, and after that, in another year, a rumor will come, and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. Therefore, behold, the days are coming that I will bring judgment on the carved images of Babylon. Her whole land shall be ashamed, and her slain shall fall in her midst. Then the heavens and the earth and all that is in them shall sing joyously over Babylon, for the plunderers shall come to her from the north. Now remember this when we get to Revelation, because we're going to see this exact same thing happen. Kind of building up to the point where reading Revelation chapter 18, it's unmistakable that there's references back to Jeremiah chapter 51, especially with this heavens and earth rejoicing, or mostly heaven rejoicing over this Babylon falling. 49, as Babylon has caused the slain of Israel to fall, so Babylon, the slain of all the earth, shall fall. You who have escaped the sword, get away. Do not stand still. Remember the Lord afar off, and let Jerusalem come to your mind. We are ashamed because we have heard reproach. Shame has covered our faces, for strangers have come into the sanctuaries of the Lord's house. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will bring judgment on her carved images, and throughout all her land the wounded shall groan. Though Babylon were to mount up to heaven, and though she were to glorify the height of her strength, yet from me plunderers would come to her, says the Lord. In other words, it's saying no matter how strong Babylon is, even if they became much stronger than they are now, like this is maybe a bit of reference to the Tower of Babel that was broken down by the Lord. Babylon's going to be broken down by the Lord again. Verse 54, the sound of a cry comes from Babylon, and great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans, because the Lord is plundering Babylon and silencing her loud voice, though her waves roar like great waters, and the noise of her voice is uttered. Because the plunderer comes against her, against Babylon, and her mighty men are taken. Every one of their bows is broken. For the Lord is the God of recompense. He will surely repay. And it will make drunk her princes and wise men, her governors, her deputies, and her mighty men, and they shall sleep a perpetual sleep and not awake, says the King, whose name is the Lord of hosts. Remember this Belshazzar and his nobles were drinking out of God's vessels, vessels that were brought from the temple of the Lord. When the handwriting came on the wall, they were drunk. And I think we're going to see some reference to this in Revelation as well. And thus says the Lord of hosts, the broad walls of Babylon shall be utterly broken. These are those walls that are big enough that they had chariot races on top of the walls. And her high gates shall be burned with fire. The people will labor in vain, and the nations, because of the fire, they shall be weary. The word which Jeremiah the prophet commanded Seraiah, the son of Neriah, the son of Messiah, when he went with Zedekiah, the king of Judah, to Babylon in the 4th year of his reign. So now he stopped kind of talking about the destruction of Babylon and saying a real life thing that's happened in his time. He's mentioning this guy Seraiah, who's going with King Zedekiah into captivity in Babylon. Remember, Zedekiah was the king who he tried to escape. He had tried to break through the walls. Once the walls of Jerusalem had been breached, he tries to escape with a fast horse, and the Babylonians catch him. And they kill all his sons in front of his eyes. That's the last thing he sees before his eyes are gouged out, and he's taken to captivity to Babylon. Well, this guy Seraiah went with him, and Seraiah was the quartermaster. So Jeremiah wrote in a book all the evil that would come upon Babylon, all these words that are written against Babylon. And Jeremiah said to Seraiah, when you arrive in Babylon and see it and read all these words, then you shall say, O Lord, you have spoken against this place to cut it off, so that none shall remain in it, neither man nor beast, but it shall be desolate forever. Now it shall be when you have finished reading this book that you shall tie a stone to it and throw it into the Euphrates. Then you shall say, thus Babylon shall sink and not rise from the catastrophe that I will bring upon her, and they shall be very weary. Thus far are the words of Jeremiah. Okay, so the last thing that happens in this chapter is the scroll of all the destruction of Babylon. Obviously, we have a second copy of this because we have it in the Bible. The scroll of all these terrible things that are going to happen to Babylon was tied to a stone and thrown into the Euphrates River right there at Babylon, saying this is what's going to happen to the Babylonian Empire. It's going to sink and never come out of the water again. So is that going to happen? And of course it will, because that's God's prophetic word. But when will this happen? And you're going to see something pretty interesting when we get into Revelation. So please turn to, and we're going to have to read this whole chapter. So realize, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a longer lesson today. So turn to Revelation chapter 18. Revelation, the last book of the Bible, chapter 18, looking at verse 1. After these things, this is John speaking, after these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. We saw that in Jeremiah. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive of her plagues. And this could very well be the rapture. Those of us who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, the idea, the whole purpose of it is to bring us Christians out before the bad things happen. Verse 5, for her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and I am no widow, and will not see sorrow. See the pride here? Therefore, her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judges her. It's like the city of Babylon fell in one day, so will future Babylon. Whether it's an actual place or whether it's just a system, it's also going to fall in one day. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of the torment. And the idea here is like like Lot's wife looking back and seeing the fire and brimstone coming down on Sodom and Gomorrah and weeping for it. Of course, she's turned to stone. But these people are saying, alas, alas, for the great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her. And here's why, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. So they're not really weeping for Babylon. They're weeping for their economic opportunities that she provided for them. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of the most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrance, oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. This is the last one of slavery that's coming out of Babylon. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which you are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more. The merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? The idea here might be like ships on the Persian Gulf looking over to where Babylon is and seeing the smoke rising from it. They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea. Where have we seen a stone being thrown in the water in reference to Babylon? Oh, I remember. Jeremiah chapter 51, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpets shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. And the voice of a bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, and by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints, and all who were slain on the earth. Next week, we'll see the final chapter of the book of Jeremiah. It's a recap of the fall of Jerusalem. God bless you.